The region of Brittany now belongs to France, but historically Brittany was a fully independent duchy, and its residents were mostly immigrants from Wales and Cornwall across the English Channel. Due to its geographic location surrounded by France and its cultural differences from the mainland French, Brittany has been a target of French kings since the Middle Ages, who sought every means to annex it. To maintain its independence, this land has never lacked national heroes with a spirit of resistance. Today, we will introduce a woman who emerged in late medieval Brittany and became a legendary warrior, Jeanne de Clisson, known as the Lioness of Brittany. Jeanne's life is a reflection of medieval women's resistance against fate. She challenged the highest male rulers of this land through the most intense and straightforward form of armed struggle, fighting relentlessly for decades to fulfill her revenge plan. Jeanne de Clisson was born in 1300 in Belleville-sur-Vie, Brittany. She came from a wealthy noble family and received the standard education for noblewomen. At the age of 12, she was already betrothed by her parents to Geoffrey de Chateaubriand, a 19-year-old nobleman. This was a typical political marriage. Jeanne and Geoffrey had 2 children after their marriage. However, her young husband unfortunately died early. For the 16-year-old Jeanne, living alone as a widow was almost impossible. Not long after, Jeanne remarried another nobleman from Brittany, Olivier de Clisson. Olivier was a very wealthy nobleman in the area. Although Jeanne and Olivier's marriage was also arranged, they fell in love after their marriage and lived a very happy life. They held a prominent position in Brittany's noble circles and had 5 children together. In the long first 40 years of her life, Jeanne did not make any waves in history. She was just an ordinary noblewoman, fortunate enough to marry the man she loved, and lived a simple and happy life with her husband on their prosperous estate. Like thousands of other medieval women, Jeanne's life revolved around supporting her husband, raising children, managing the household, watching her children grow up day by day, and hoping to grow old with her husband. However, in early 1340, turmoil swept through the entire region of Brittany, and Jeanne's husband, bound by noble obligations, was forced to get involved. The Duke of Brittany died without an heir, and to seize control of the duchy, France and England went to war. This was the famous War of the Breton Succession. The nobles of Brittany began to take up arms and choose sides. Fighting on horseback was the duty of medieval nobility. However, deciding whom to fight for and whom to be loyal to was a matter that required careful consideration. After weighing their options, Olivier and Jeanne decided to support King Philip VI of France. This decision was mainly because the House of Blois, supported by the French king, had close ties with the Clisson family. Jeanne and Olivier bid a tearful farewell. After her husband left, Jeanne's peaceful life was gone forever. The French army suffered successive defeats on the battlefield, causing unrest among the people and leading to mutual accusations among the nobles. During the Civil War in 1342, the English army attacked the town of Vannes, and Olivier was one of the commanders defending the besieged town. In early 1342, Vannes was captured by the English army, and Olivier, along with other officers, was taken prisoner. In the Middle Ages, the most common way for a noble to gain freedom after being captured was to pay a ransom. However, unexpectedly, Olivier was not asked for a high ransom this time. Instead, the English proposed an exchange of prisoners, trading Olivier for an English nobleman captured by the French. According to records, Olivier was the only nobleman exchanged and released by the English, which seemed rather unusual. This led to suspicions that Olivier had not fully committed to defending the city. The House of Blois, incited by Philip VI, saw this as an opportunity to use the accusation as an excuse to seize Olivier's property. On January 19, 1343, England and France signed the Truce of Malestroit, ending the war. After the war, King Philip VI of France decided to hold a tournament to celebrate. Olivier and 15 other Breton lords were invited to participate in the event on French territory. The nobles were completely unsuspecting and had no idea they were walking into a trap. Upon entering French territory, Olivier discovered that there was no tournament at all. He was immediately surrounded and arrested by French soldiers and sent to Paris for trial on charges of treason. In Paris, these men were put on trial, but almost no evidence was provided during the proceedings. The trial was entirely a setup. When the news of Olivier's arrest reached Brittany, Jeanne almost fainted. After gathering her strength, she immediately took action to find a way to rescue her husband. However, since the mastermind behind this plot was the King of France himself, appealing through official channels was completely futile. Jeanne had no choice but to secretly bribe the prison guards. Unfortunately, this method also failed. Olivier was transferred to a more secure prison, and the bribed guards confessed Jeanne's attempt to bribe them. Soon, Jeanne herself was wanted by the French authorities. On March 19th, Jeanne received a summons from the Paris court demanding that she go to Paris to explain her involvement in the alleged conspiracy. Of course, Jeanne was not foolish enough to walk into the trap, especially since she had never been involved in any rebellion and was as innocent as her husband. On August 2nd, 1343, Olivier and the other wrongfully accused Breton noble were publicly executed in Paris on charges of conspiring with the King of England against the King of France. After their heads were decapitated, they were sent to Nantes in Brittany and displayed on the city gates. Not only was Olivier wrongfully executed, but he also bore the disgrace of being labeled a traitor and having his head displayed. This humiliation and grief completely shattered Jeanne's heart. After mourning her husband in deep sorrow, Jeanne took her 2 young sons to Nantes to show them their father's head displayed on the city gates. The flames of revenge erupted in Jeanne's heart like molten lava. Clad in mourning attire, she silently vowed in front of her beloved's head that she would make Philip VI pay with blood and ensure that France paid the heaviest price for the shameless murder. Jeanne made a decision that is astonishing even by today's standards. She sold almost all her material wealth, castles, land, jewels, and used the money to form an army of 400 men. At the age of 43, Jeanne took off her fine clothes and jewelry, cut her hair short, and donned a suit of hard armor. She mounted her horse, took her children, and left behind her comfortable and wealthy life as a noblewoman to live the dangerous life of a warrior. Jeanne led her army, launching attacks on French garrisoned castles, killing the French nobles who had mocked Olivier, leaving none alive. After each attack, Jeanne deliberately left 1 or 2 soldiers alive to inform Philip VI that Olivier's widow Jeanne was seeking revenge. The Lioness of Brittany, elusive and powerful in combat, was rumored to be unbeatable and impossible to capture. Jeanne de Clisson and her mercenaries quickly became a nightmare for many French nobles along the Breton border. Enraged, Philip VI immediately began to mobilize forces to hunt her down and put an end to her destructive actions. Jeanne struck first. By the time Philip VI gathered his wits, Jeanne had already crossed the sea to England. Wisely, she formed an alliance with France's archenemy, the English. King Edward III of England helped Jeanne purchase 3 warships. Jeanne had the ships painted black with red sails and named the fleet My Revenge. Jeanne decided to make full use of her followers' knowledge of the sea and became a pirate in the English Channel, targeting as many French ships as possible. Jeanne's warships were of excellent craftsmanship, built by the maritime powerhouse of England, and were far superior to ordinary vessels. Within weeks, Jeanne's fleet encountered its first victims, a small ship flying the flag of the King of France. Seeing the emblem of her enemy, the fleur-de-lis, Jeanne's eyes burned red with fury. She immediately ordered a relentless attack on the small ship, brutally slaughtering the crew. She maintained her signature practice of sparing a few French sailors, placing them on a small raft near the French coast, and instructing them to return home and tell the king who had massacred their comrades. Thus began the reign of terror of Jeanne de Clisson. The Lioness of Brittany became a nightmare for French sailors. She pursued any French ship, even intercepting ships flying different flags to check if they were carrying Frenchmen. If any were found on board, the entire crew would be ruthlessly slaughtered. Jeanne insisted on personally beheading any French nobleman she encountered, believing that the French nobility had betrayed her family and murdered her husband. In some sense, this belief was not entirely wrong. In 1346, when the 100 Years' War between England and France broke out, Jeanne eagerly served as a supply ship for Edward III's fleet and guarded the coast against French ships attempting to flank the English by sea. Although Jeanne did not manage to directly harm Philip VI or the House of Blois, she did disrupt French maritime trade and caused significant trouble for France. To some, she was a hero. To others, a brutal villain. Perhaps, for most, she was somewhere in between. But one thing was certain. Jeanne de Clisson did not care what anyone thought of her. Eventually, the French managed to sink Jeanne's warship, resulting in the death of her youngest son. Jeanne, however, escaped with her eldest son on a small raft. After drifting at sea for 5 days, they were rescued by the English. Having narrowly escaped death, Jeanne regrouped in England and continued her piracy career for another 13 years. By the 1350s, Jeanne's wounded heart began to heal. During her exploits, she met Sir Walter Bentley, a brave English naval commander who was 10 years her junior. Despite being over 50, Jeanne's charm immediately attracted Walter, and in 1356, they officially became husband and wife. As the 100 Years' War progressed, the French no longer had the time to pursue Jeanne. She was finally able to return to her homeland in Brittany. Jeanne and her husband settled in Hennebont Castle, a small port town on the Breton coast. In 1359, after nearly 20 years of fighting, the Lioness of Brittany finally closed her eyes for the last time.